wonderful to be in the presence of God, to be able to come and worship with the body of believers. And I was working yesterday, and Mike Wilson looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh, tomorrow we get to go worship with the corporate body of Christ." How many of you are that excited about this morning? Me too. Me too. Me too. I'm more excited to share this sermon with you today. I'm going to say it like this. The church is not what God intends it to be because of the false teachings and false narratives of the church today. In other words, we're missing out on all the things that God has called us to, that God has called us to experience, because we refuse to embrace God's kingdom and the way He made things. I'm going to address some things today that rightfully so. Now remember what I just said. Those of you in the room, that when you see this, don't put it up yet. When you see the title of the sermon, the hair on the back of your neck is going to go up. Those of you watching on TV and YouTube, the hair on the back of your neck is going to go up. Don't turn it off. Okay? Because you're about to be set free from the bondage of the false teaching of the church. You're going to learn how to encourage those that God has called to lead you. You're going to learn how to encourage them in their position. You're going to learn how to cheer them on. And you're also going to learn how to hold them accountable. The title of my sermon is called Love and Toxic Masculinity. Thanks, man. Love, you can put it up now. Love and toxic masculinity. How many of you have heard the phrase in the world, toxic masculinity? Actually, it's a wave going through college campuses today, including Christian college campuses and some seminaries, that men in their raw state are wrong. That we don't need masculinity. We don't need men to be men. We need them to be more like women. Some of you are already mad and you've already shut down. Some of you, I knew he was one of those guys. You know, Angie spent, a year and a half living with us? Yeah. Am I a toxic masculinity guy at home? No, my job at home is to sit on the couch and snuggle children and love them and play with them and goof off with them. That's my job, and I do a great job at that. I'm a lover, not a fighter, but I like to fight too. When it's needed, right? When it's needed. How many of you would like a bunch of effeminate men to be on the battlefield, protecting you from Al-Qaeda? Protecting you from ISIS? No, you don't want a bunch of effeminate men being there on the battlefield protecting you from ISIS? Rob says they go first. Right. We have a serious problem in our culture today for good reason. For good reason. Listen to what I just said there, ladies. We have a serious problem about masculinity in our culture today for good reason. Now, Many of you have said to me, Pastor Mike, I know what you believe about men, and I know what you believe about women, but why don't you ever talk to men? Well, I do. But today I'm going to do it on display for you, women, so that you can get your panties out of your rear end. But mostly so that the men can listen to what I'm saying, and you women can encourage them to do what God has called them to do, instead of encouraging them to be like you. You figure this out yet? Did somebody shut down the web browser? I got it.
Literally, we hit it and it just throws it on the screen.
Excuse me.
Enjoy your pop.
You got it? Yeah, you got it. See? Look at you. You got to blow it up. You got to hit the little box up in the... Oh, that's right. You don't have your glasses on today. Okay. And then you have to go down there and hit slideshow. Oh, this is too much fun. You hit F5, it'll start the slideshow too. It's not on there. It was on there earlier today.
As soon as we put it over there, it disappeared.
Wow. Satan doesn't want me to teach this sermon. There you go. Slide it over there. She got it. She said she got it.
I can see it. I can't see that.
The F5. Not working today. All right. You want me to get it?
She's on it. You just went off of it. Oh.
Yay! Love and toxic masculinity. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Let's just stop here for this little Bible verse right here. How many of you guys know what Bible verse this is? Anybody know what Bible verse it is? Proverbs 1:7. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Just that statement is evil in our society today. Back in the 90s, we went through this thing of no fear. We went through this thing. People misquote the idea of what love is. Perfect love casts out all fear. And so we quote that as, well, we don't need to fear anything. You don't want to fear the Lord? You don't want to have to fear the Lord? Maybe the reason why you don't worry about fearing the Lord is because you think the world has become effeminate. Okay? But how many men in the room can say the only thing you really act upon is anger and fear? Raise your hand. This is not a man in the room. The only thing you really act upon is anger and fear. Raise your hand. But sometimes you might act on other things, like things you want, because you're just selfish and prideful. But the real things that you will act upon is anger and fear. Fear of not having what you want to have. Fear of not being what you want to be. Right? How many men can honestly say that they struggle at acting because of an emotional attachment to somebody? Raise your hand. Men, this isn't a question that you don't answer. You need to answer it because don't be afraid of your wife. I'll take care of her. Okay? How many of you men can honestly say that you don't remember the last time you acted out for someone because you emotionally were attached to them? It was more out of fear or anger or fear of not having something, but it wasn't just an emotional attachment. That you struggle at acting out in a positive or negative way just because of an emotional attachment. Raise your hand if that's the case. Women need to look at this, okay? Now, these men don't, that does not mean these men need to go off and be reprogrammed. What it means is America needs to understand who men are. Okay? Do you understand that? How many of you realize that the mantra has been out there for decades now that men need to understand who women are, right? And women have a right in our society today. I don't agree with this. I think it's abomination. I think it's absolutely sinful. But women have a right to leave their husbands and divorce them if the husband doesn't understand her and work at understanding her, right? How many of you guys have seen this? You've experienced this? He doesn't treat me like I want to be treated. He doesn't feel the things that I feel. He doesn't understand me. And so how can I be with somebody the rest of my life who doesn't understand me, right? And so in America today, for the last 30 years, we have beat the drum on men's heads that you need to be more like women. Do you guys understand that? How many of you would say that you know that's true? It's not a rhetorical question. You need to. How many of you would say that you know that's true? That it's been taught, even in our schools. We teach little boys to stop acting like little boys, and we expect them to act like little girls. Okay? That's what we want them to do. How many of you have ever raised a little boy and a little girl? Are they different? In the 90s, there was this mantra going around in academia that boys and girls are not different at all. The only difference is nurture, meaning that the only difference between a boy and a girl is what they were taught, and there's no natural difference with them. How many parents who've had boys and girls can say that's the dumbest thing they've ever heard of in their life, and these people must be pointy-headed intellectual academics who don't really have any life experience? Raise your hand if you believe that. Okay, thank you. All right, you have boys and girls, two girls and two boys, and it's crazy. There's a huge difference. And not every little boy is like a little boy, not every little girl is like a little girl. I've got plenty of little girls that think they're boys, tomboys, and they squishy's kind of creepy. But they are. There is a difference. Why are we not celebrating the differences? Because the mantra in America today has been that masculinity, boldness, passionate people who act forcibly with boldness are evil. We worship consensus. We worship consensus. Right? A man is evil if he makes up his mind and won't be changed. He's narrow-minded. We automatically place labels on people that are passionate and bold and won't be unwavering. They're unwavering. We label them arrogant, know-it-alls, bullies. I'm not a bully. Just don't get in my way. You'll get ran over. I'm going to give you an example. So I'm in the kitchen cooking. I love to cook. Obviously, I love to cook, and I love to eat, right? I'm in the kitchen cooking, and I have lots of little kids in my house. Always have, and probably always will at this point. They just keep coming. I don't even want to make any more. They just keep coming. And my wife can cook in a kitchen with 6 children on the floor, laying. And if you've ever been around my kids, they'll come in, they want to be wherever you're at, and they'll lay on the floor. And they'll kick and they'll roll and they'll put their feet up on the cabinets and okay, that's what they do. Well, that's okay when mom's in the kitchen because mom can easily maneuver without looking. She feels them, and she steps over them, and she steps around them. I just step. And there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I don't apologize. Why don't I apologize? Because you're a bully. You're mean. You don't care about your... No, I do care about my children. I care that they have the fear of the Lord. Anybody ever thought that you could just go to God and lay around and flop around and do what you want and not worry about what God's doing, but expect him to worry about where you're at and what you're doing, and then you realize you're in a bad place? Anybody ever been there? Anybody ever done that? Oh. Okay. And I want my children to know that when God is doing something, you should be focused on what God's doing, not about what you're doing. And don't you dare expect him to stop what he's doing to focus on where you're at and what you're doing. That's called the fear of the Lord. But my mindset is evil in America. Well, you stepped on your kid. Well, I taught him a lesson. Right? Because you're a brute. You're just a monster. Am I? So is God a brute and a monster? How many of you guys have ever gotten away what God was doing? Did you get ran over? Did he stop and go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see you today. Come on, sweetie, get up off the floor. Here's the best one. My wife does this. She's a wonderful mother, okay? But she does this because she placates. Anybody ever had God placate you? No. What do you mean placate? Well, you play games with them. You manipulate them without really bossing them around, right? Right? So she'll come in the room and she'll see that the children are laying all over the floor and wanting to talk to me and singing songs and letting the dog wrestle with them while I'm cooking. And she'll say, hey kids, why don't we go over here and do this? Did she teach them anything? It's no different than putting those latches on your cupboards. Did you teach your children anything? Not at all. Are you making your children strong or weak? Weak. You're a monster. Well, even Children's Services comes in and checks your house for those. I look at them and say, well, I've raised 6 kids over here, and not a one of them. So you're telling me I need to put those latches on my cupboards? My kids, it wouldn't matter. They'd be like, oh, something to figure out. Okay? Am I making my children strong or weak? I'm making them strong when I step on them. I'm not going to walk around, oh, I broke his arm, yeah! I'm not going to do that. I want you to understand something here. God is not what we want him to be. He is who he is. And he doesn't care what you think about who he is. And his lack of caring about what you think who he is not mean, and it's not evil. It's godly. I started this sermon by sharing with you that the church has been robbed from all that they are supposed to be. The evidence of this robbing of the church is in our government. The government now takes care of the needy. The government now teaches those who have problems learning. The government now houses the orphans. The government now houses and takes care of the widows. Who did Jesus tell to do that to? The church. Why isn't the church doing it? Because they have been robbed. How did they rob themselves? Because they refused godly leadership. Listen to what I'm saying. They refused to heed and follow godly leadership. Oh, there were leaders who stood up and said, this is wrong. We should do this. The church should do this. We shouldn't give this responsibility to the government. Where does the wounded go? To the church or to the hospital with their Medicaid cards? They go to the hospital. They get Medicaid, Medicare, and just a few of us have our own health care, right? Who does the brokenhearted go to? The counselors, right? They take their Medicaid, their Medicare, and now that Obamacare went through, they can go to any counselor they want with their health insurance. They don't go to the church, do they? Why? Because the church failed to bring up, foster, encourage, support godly leadership. The church has become anemic. The church has become weak. Oh, we're way more sensitive. We're way more outwardly emotionally caring. But we have no power with our love. How do we love so much more and have no power behind it? You ever thought of that? The church is way more loving and gracious and caring than it used to be. But there's nothing behind it. There's no power with it. There's no spiritual authority with it. Why? Because nobody in the building knows how to take authority. They couldn't take authority. They had to pass laws. They had to get consensus. Don't you understand? When they decided to have some authority, they had to have a counseling session, and they had to get the council together, and they had to have consensus with the council in order to even get any thing done, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? A man of God couldn't just say, hey, I believe God's calling us to do this. What do you guys think? Let's pray about it. And then they go off and do it. Can't do that anymore. As a matter of fact, no one can hardly get anything done in the church because no one will submit to anybody. Well, that guy in charge of the ushers, he didn't talk to me very nicely. I don't feel really good about my efforts I put in at the church. I don't feel appreciated. Right? We go to the church in order to get affirmation. I want affirmation. Dan, this is what affirmation looks like. Ready? Hey, Dan, did you hear worship this morning?
Yeah, I did.
What'd you think?
I thought it was awesome.
Oh, really? What do you think was awesome? You was awesome. Really? Well, you know, Dan, it's all about God, you know. It's all about God. But it's all about God, and you know, if it wasn't for the guys, that's what affirmation is. We're always looking for a pat on the back, right? We're always looking for somebody to appreciate what we've done, right? Right? Isn't that right? Well, nobody paid attention. I put some effort in. Nobody cared. We're always looking for affirmation. Why? You ever ask yourself that? What? Why? I mean, the only affirmation I need when I'm serving under somebody is to know that I did what they wanted me to do. You good? Did I meet your needs? Did I accomplish the goal you wanted me to accomplish? Yeah. Okay, thanks, man. That's the only Why? Because I don't serve that guy at the church because I like him. I don't serve him because I'm going to draw strength from my relationship with the church. I serve the church, and I serve in the church, and I submit to that person that's over me in the church because God called me to, and I'm obeying God. And in order for me to obey God, I need to make sure that the person God called me to serve under is happy with me, is pleased by my efforts. Outside of that, I'm good. I want you to stop and think about this. So we've created an environment of an emotionally diseased people coming together and sharing their diseases with each other emotionally. I remember, this goes way back. I remember in the 70s being in church, in the 80s being in church with my dad, and we used to take open prayer requests on Sunday night. It was the same night we had special singing. Open prayer request on Sunday night. And it would go on for 45 minutes to an hour. Well, I've been really having a hard time this week, Brother Green. The devil's really been after me. I woke up the other day and I had a splitting headache. And then I walked to the kitchen and stubbed my toe. And I thought, devil, you're really out to get me today. But I'll hold on to Jesus. Have you ever been to a church like that? You better not have Wednesday night groups like that. I teach all the leaders, ask everybody, and what's God doing? What's God doing? What is it that you need God to do besides oh, you poor thing. I'll be praying for you, sister. We love, oh, that's just horrible. Oh, yeah, it is, isn't it? Ever met people like that? We have idolized emotionalism in the church. We have worshiped emotion. If I don't get a certain emotional experience when I leave, have you guys ever heard people say, I don't like going to that church because I don't feel good when I leave? Folks, okay, so I treat Sunday morning service like coaching. You're never supposed to feel good after a practice. Right? At least he didn't make us run 3 miles today. He only made us run 2.99. Right? You're never supposed to be. How many of you guys ever played sports and you gave your all? How many of you ever felt great after a win or a loss? Emotionally, you might have been feeling great, but were you feeling great physically? No. If you give your all, are you ever going to feel great? Yeah. If the reason you gave your all was to obey something bigger than you. And when you give your all, you know that you gave your all and that you've done your part. Oh. Think about this. Go to the next slide, please. That was just my introduction to my sermon. King David, a man after God's own heart, says, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, any men like it when people rise against you? There's that toxic masculinity, Dan. You and I, we're bullies. And if he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. What? This was David, a man after God's own heart. Anybody ever seen those effeminate guys? They're wearing their skinny jeans. When they have little 2 and 3 year olds, they're like, all right now, buddy, you know that's not God's best for you, and that's not the right behavior we're supposed to have, okay, buddy? So let's try to do that better next time, all right? He walks behind his wife. He asks for permission if he's allowed to do things. He's sensitive. He's the kind of guy you really want to go talk to because he'll really affirm you and your experiences in life. You ever met people like that? What? Stop it. My gosh, I'm so happy you're here today. I'm just going to go kill that lion. Gosh darn it, he took my lamb again. We laugh about this, but the idea of killing an animal and slaughtering it and cutting it into pieces is like, it's brutality. Did you know that that's what God made man to do? Pastor Mike, I don't believe it. Where do you think your hamburger comes from? I remember a couple weeks ago we raised hogs. We took a couple of our hogs to the market, and we go over there, and Squishy goes, what do they do with them? I said, they bring them into this room where there's a rack over the top of them, and they take a gun behind the ear, and they shoot them. And they kill them. She's like, where's the room? I said, well, they're not going to let you see the room. She said, well, then what do they do to them? I said, and then they tie up their legs and take them and hang them by their legs on this rack, hoist them up there, and then they cut them from their butthole all the way down to their sternum. And they let all the gunk fall out on the floor. And then they peel their skin off, which is that's probably the hardest part of the whole job. And then they chop them up into little pieces so we can eat them. 2 weeks later, we come up here and have breakfast with the guys on the program. And we're like, Chubby Fat tastes good. One of the pigs' names was Chubby Fat, and the other was Wilbur. And we're eating some bacon going, Chubby Fat tastes good. Do you know that there is a huge percentage of people in our society that would say that I abused my daughter by telling her that? And that if I would have done what I did when I was a kid, when we butchered chickens out behind the house, and I raised 4-H rabbits and I got to butcher them, that my dad would be abusive to me, emotionally abusive. But men were made to do that. Any men in the room, you could do that. It doesn't affect you emotionally in any way, shape, or form. You're like, it's food. I'm about to eat. Glory to God. Chubby fat tastes good. Chubby fat tastes good. She's like, we got a female pig at the house, and we're like, when can we? She's like, Daddy, when can we breed? What's her name? Dottie. When can we breed Dottie? Because I want little piggies. Because I never want to run out of bacon. I mean, the first weekend after we got the bacon, the kids, like, Friday night, Saturday, and Saturday night, all they did was eat bacon. They're like, Mommy, can we just have a bacon frenzy? Sure. Men were made to not bother them at all. Go out and kill Bambi and slaughter her right there and start a fire and have dinner. No big deal to me. Women are like, not all of them, but some of them. It's okay. Hey, I'm not making you women feel bad about who you are, am I? Is it okay that I could tell you how men are and it not be an affront to women? Don't worry, men, you're going to get yours. David was a man. When he saw injustice, what did he do? He went and fixed it. Just a side note here. What were all the Israelite armies doing when David came on the scene while Goliath was making fun of them? They were trembling and hiding, hoping somebody would change their diaper. And here out of the field comes a boy who's had to be a man, and he says, "Are you serious? You guys are going to sit here and let him mock your God? When I was 12, I killed a bear with my own hands in a slingshot. Show me where he's at." That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Next slide. How is it that our seminaries and churches in much of Christendom are somehow attracting and training effeminate pastors? Why is this happening at such an alarming high rate? By the way, this is on Eric Kahn's website called Hard Man in a World of Softness. Why are our Christian institutions so skilled at turning out theologically precise men with softness as their crowning virtue? They speak softly, they play softly, and they avoid hardness at all costs. They don't initiate in leadership. They take responsibility they don't initiate in leadership or take responsibility or confront hard cases of church discipline. Little wonder our people are effeminate when so many of our shepherds lack the stones to model biblical masculinity. Those who preen and obsess over their appearance like women, who know more about pastel dress shirts and overpriced machiatos than a hard day of physical labor, and pit bookishness against a pair of Carhartt overhauls, as though learning and labor were mutually exclusive. Why has the limp-wristed poetry-writing therapist in a sweater vest replaced the flesh and blood shepherding ranch hand upon which Christ actually modeled our ministry? And why can't we even talk about these things in the church without being called bigoted or insensitive? I got the answer why, and it lays at the men's feet. I'll share it with you in a few minutes. Next slide. The prophets don't dress themselves soft. They don't have an effeminate bearing. Could you imagine? Okay, so was it Elijah that was the prophet that challenged the prophets and built an altar? was Elijah, right? Not Elisha, I get them confused. Elijah. Now, how many of you ever read that? How many of you know that in the middle of it, he stopped and made fun of them? Openly. He was a jerk. He's my hero. Right? How did he make fun of him? How did he mock him? Anybody know? Right, he said, "Where's your God now?" Covering his feet. Now, that phrase meant taking a poop. He got in front of them and said, "Where's your God, huh? Taking a poop?" Neener, neener, neener. Brutish. Could you imagine Elijah? Okay, now, you guys build your altar, okay? And I'll go over here and build my altar, and we'll see whose God is God, all right? I'm really hoping it's my God, but, if it's not, it's okay. Right? Angie? He was a show-off. So right before he called God down to start the fire, he dumped all the water. He told him, "Hey, go get some more water and dump on my altar. Fill the moat around the altar. Let's fill it all. Let's just saturate the place. Better yet, let's dig a pond and put the altar in the bottom of it." He was a show-off. Right? All right, now, you know what? Just for giggles, guys. Just for giggles, why don't we build a moat around our altar and put water on it? Wouldn't that be funny? I mean, how many of you guys have ever seen these men who are afraid to lead with boldness because they might offend somebody in the audience, right? So even when they have to be bold, they surround it with laughter and jokes and softness so that everybody can digest it because they're afraid to be called insensitive, right? I'm going to say this, and I don't mean to be mean or rude, but it's truth and you need to hear it. We all need to learn that God calls people to lead other people. And he calls people to submit to leadership. And that does not mean mindlessly. And that does not mean that you just obey without looking at the Word of God and holding your leaders accountable. But what it means is, do not think that your affirmation of your emotions is more important than the goal that God has called the leader to accomplish. And when you should have listened to that because it was really important. And when you do, what you're doing is saying, my feelings are more important than God's goal. When you withhold obedience because you don't like how you were asked to obey, you're saying your emotions and your feelings are more important than accomplishing God's goal. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Well, I was going to do it, but he didn't ask nicely"? Right? I didn't like how they talked to me. Right? Because you are the determiner of speech. You are the determiner of the tone of how everyone should talk. Think about it. I just see Elijah. All right, now, I'm going to call down my God and see if he'll. No, Elijah mocked him. Elijah strutted a little bit. God is that way. That's a characteristic of God. Did you know that? No, it's not. Read your Bible. Jesus constantly said, how long do I have to put up with you? Think about that. How insensitive. Oh my gosh, even Jesus was. Do you know that Jesus was a sinner in the mind of a social liberal today? In the mind of most counselors, he was a sinner. They don't even understand what they're saying when they say it. He shouldn't say those kind of things. Well, are you saying he sinned? Why did he have to say it like that? There were better ways to say. Are you saying he wasn't perfect? When he said, let the dead bury the dead. You know, he could have said it a little bit kinder, a little bit more gentle. Are you saying that the Son of God, God himself, didn't say something right? You are smarter than him? You know more than he does? Think about this. Instead of reading the scriptures and saying that's how we should be, we read them and criticize how Jesus interacted with people and how the disciples interacted with people. Think of the mindset it takes to get there. Just think of the mindset it takes to get to a place where we can read the scriptures and have debates about whether or not Jesus or the prophets were kind and gentle enough. Next slide. False and toxic masculinity. What drives false masculinity is not Christ-like attitude of sacrifice and responsibility bearing, but trying to impress or control others. Let me read that again. What drives false masculinity is not this Christ-like attitude of sacrifice and responsibility bearing, but trying to impress or control others. It's hypocrisy. It says, two men have maybe driving a pickup for two very different reasons. One is in it for the ego trip, the other because it's a vehicle well suited for the service of others. And I tell you, the third one is saying it's to serve others, but it's an ego trip. Right? I got a truck, but I'm not going to do anything in it except look pretty. Don't you get it dirty? Right? Right? We have this joke about my truck. Because I don't pay for the truck. My truck is paid for by my job. Okay? And I bought it to drive to Cincinnati, to be pretty. I work in its office in Cincinnati where people drive BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes and Acuras and Lexuses, right? Or big, sexy trucks. And so, being from Marion, I'm not driving an Acura. I'm not that guy, right? I'm not even driving an Acura SUV. So I get me a sexy truck, right? That can do the things I need it to do to serve other people. And so I'd take it to a job site. They'd be like, "Were you afraid to scratch it?" Yes, because that's not why I bought it. So then the other day I'm at a job site, and I'm backing. I mean, I can back a trailer almost any place, right? And I'm backing a trailer into this little tight area in an alley with garages around, and I park it and get it out. And I'm thinking now, I had to back up right next to, I'm about this far away with the side of my front side of my truck to a pole. And I'm like, I need to remember that pole's there, but I'm just going to drop the trailer and get back in the truck and go, right? And so I drop the trailer, and then somebody asks me a question, and I go to the job site, and I'm walking around, and I'm doing things, and 2 hours later I get back to the truck, and I get in the truck, and as I'm pulling away, I turn the wheel and straighten it out. And I hear this Oh, did I run over a pop can? Oh, no. And I just just grazed the side of the front passenger's door of my truck, and $2,000. $2,000 worth of damage. So it's a work truck now. It's a work truck, because if I drive to Cincinnati, I'm going to have to say, oh, yeah, I got an accident. But I just want you to think about, two guys can be driving a truck. One can be doing it with false masculinity, and one can have godly masculinity. And unfortunately, the majority of people in this room, the majority of men in this room, have false masculinity. Where you are masculine to prove something. That your masculinity isn't because you want to go accomplish the things that God has called you to accomplish, and you want to provide and care for those that God has called you to provide and care for. Your masculinity is about being somebody, about defining who you are. Well, that's not your job. God's already defined you. He's already got a plan for you, men. You know what I'm saying? It's like, ladies, all of you ladies can appreciate this, and maybe my goal today is to challenge men to stop acting like little boys. You know how little boys act, right? Come on, Dad, I'll fight you, right? Trying to prove themselves, right? That's a little boy. If you're still trying to prove yourself based on what you're driving, you're trying to prove yourself based on what you're wearing, you're a little boy. You haven't even grown up yet. Jump up and down, maybe they'll fall. I did say that out loud. But I also want to encourage women to appreciate men who are trying to figure out their masculinity. See, because our generation, our society in America has been browbeating everybody to appreciate the feminist and their feminism and their beauty as women and how beautiful their emotions are, right? And we tell men, you need to be patient with her. She's a woman. She's got emotions, right? Right? Well, why aren't we saying that to the women? Women, if your husband has a truck, look at him and say, what have you done truckly lately? What have you done truckly lately that justifies having a truck, big boy? Come on, get out there and get some wood and put it in there, man. Move something heavy. Be a man. Hercules, Hercules, Hercules. Help your neighbor move. Right? Do something truckly with it. Chris is begging his wife to get a truck right now. It's just hilarious. Now, why are women so afraid of the masculinity of men? Because we've abused it for about 100 years or more, maybe centuries. Men have abused their masculinity for centuries. And godly men have abused their masculinity. I'm the man. You need to do what I tell you to do. Bleh. You need to obey me, woman. Let me tell you something, ladies. If you have a husband that's like that, you need to look at them and say, you have failed me. Look at your husband, and if you're like, well, I can't say that to him, he's mad, he'll hit me. Call me. Call me. Because I have plenty of masculinity, and I will meet your husband's arrogance with my masculinity. God has uniquely made me for this purpose. You want to feel like what it feels like to get beat on by somebody? Let's do this. Look at your husband and say, you have failed me. Well, why would you be so mean? That's not mean. Don't you want to know when you fail? Dan Campbell, don't you want to know when you fail? You ain't man enough to handle it? Huh? Huh? You don't think we have a problem in our culture? I was watching a basketball game the other day, last night. This guy just flat out hacked somebody in the basketball game. And when the ref called a foul, he threw a fit. He threw a fit like, well, you can't do that to me. And I'm sitting there going, a man, a real man, when he makes a mistake, says, my bad, sorry, let me fix that for you. Reminds me the other day, somebody said, I was so proud with somebody. I was talking to somebody, and they said, yeah, I was at my job, and I was doing this job, and I did it wrong. I didn't do what the boss told me to do. And so when he came to check on my job, and it was all done, and it failed, I looked at my boss and said, don't worry about it. I will fix it on my time. I didn't do it the way you told me to do it. It's my fault. That's a man. That's a man. Toxic masculinity is, well, that stupid woman you gave me screwed it up. Right? Well, I wouldn't make those mistakes if my wife would leave me alone at night so I could sleep. Right? A man takes responsibility for his own actions. I don't mean to hurt people's feelings that are in the room, but I probably am about to. But that's okay, because I'm a man. God has called me to plow this garden, and I'm plowing it. If you find yourself without a place to live and no food to eat, that's your fault. You're a man. Don't you be blaming it on other people. It ain't going to ever get better until you take responsibility for your actions. Be a man instead of a boy. We got mothers breastfeeding around here, but there ain't nothing left for you. So go make your own way. Figure it out. Own it. I did this. I screwed up my life. Thank you for helping me put my life back together. I will work like it's my job to make my way. I go, hey, did you find a job yet? No, man, I'm waiting for somebody to call me. Mom, I'm going to be down here playing this video game. When dinner times come, make sure you text me. Do you understand the problem with toxic masculinity? And those same men, they go get a job, they start bossing people around. I'm a man. Let me tell you, what drives false masculinity is not the Christ-like attitude of sacrifice or responsibility bearing, but trying to impress or control others. Next slide. This is the prime reason for the disdain of our culture towards masculinity and God. Men being boys is the reason why the church has no power. It's the reason why the government takes care of the needy. It's the reason why that the majority of poor households, children are raised without a father. It's because there are no men. Well, Pastor Mike, I'm looking for my disability so I can get disability. Did you walk up here? Yeah. Are you talking to me? Yeah. Well, you don't understand. I've got emotional problems. I could fix that for you. I was standing in a grocery at the gas station the other day, and there was another man. He was a man working a job, driving his truck because he was doing stuff. There's this lady sitting there and just talking about people begging for stuff. They got to talking about food stamps. No, I'm not against people with food stamps. Just get over it. Okay? But the truth is the truth. If it hurts, you should investigate yourself, not me. And they said to me, they're like, I don't understand it. I said, I know. We got to talking about how the real problem with America and the men, well, boys in men's clothes, is that they don't have to go hungry. You don't have to go hungry. Well, I'm waiting for my disability. Well, what's your disability? I have ADHD. I could fix that. Dad, did you have ADHD? Yeah? Yeah. How bad's your ADHD? Did you slap your first grade teacher in the mouth? No? You did? That's okay, because my dad worked 40 years at a job and pastored the church and ministered to people and is still doing it. He's 80 years old. So what's your excuse? Why would you put yourself into bondage because of how you feel? What is wrong with you? God made you. He purposed you to be a conqueror, to be a provider. And you're walking around going, I don't know where my disability is. I gotta go see a counselor. I don't know what my disability is, but I know I've got one somewhere. You're walking, you're talking, you can read, you got a phone, you can't get a job. Well, I get mad at people and I act out. I can fix that. We could go into a room and I will make you mad and you can act out. And you will be solved. You will be delivered. Do you know why we have so many ADHD cases and attention and anger disorders? Because there ain't no men. When their sons acted out, they snatched them up and taught them to fear the Lord. Right? Jim, you raised 4 boys, right? Did you have to grab them up and teach them to fear the Lord? And if you didn't, they'd have been diagnosed with ADHD and anger disorder and all kinds of other things. They all work now to provide for their families and they're good. Oh, wow, that's amazing. They're men. I love women. I just don't know what to do with my son. He's just out of control. I know exactly what to do. pick me, pick me, pick me, let me help. Sign this waiver first. Listen, this is why women despise God. This is why women despise the God of the Bible. They despise men who act like the God of the Bible. Because all they've ever seen in life is boys wearing men's clothes. They don't even value God's love as love. Do you understand that? There's some godly men in this room. And you see a man snatch his kid up and teach him a little fear, and you know what happens? You're like, yes. Those godly men are like, yes. And there's some godly women in this room that are married to godly men, and they're like, yes. And then there's some women that are like, oh my gosh, that man must be out of control. Quick, somebody call Turning Point. Right? The last time I was at the doctor said, do you feel safe at home? I said, I have 6 daughters. What do you think? I told my wife, she was sitting there, I said, you know what I wanted to tell him? I wanted to tell him, if you ask me again, I'm going to punch you in the mouth. You ask me again, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to turn you in for abuse. Well, you're insinuating that my home is violent? We automatically insinuate that a home is violent? Think about that. Think about where our culture's gone. You feel safe at home? No, I don't. The last time I woke up, I fell asleep at the TV. I was watching TV, and I woke up, and my belly was covered with makeup, and they painted my eyebrows, and I felt like they had accosted me, and it really hurt my feelings, and it scarred me for life. I felt like they were making fun of my sensitive side. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Do you feel safe at home? Well, Pastor Mike, they asked that because of all the men out there that are violent. All the boys dressed in men's clothes that throw fits. My mom used to say, that little boy, when he's 16 months old and he throws a fit, you guys ever seen a little boy, 16 months old, throw a fit? And if he was a 300-pound man, he'd hurt people, right? Listen, if this fits you, wear it, own it, and do something about it. Ready? Even you that are on TV. If you had a 16-month-old who threw a fit and he could have hurt somebody, and he's now 20, and he's 250 pounds, and he still throws fits, you failed. You were supposed to train that child. You were supposed to teach that child how to deal with his masculinity, and instead you taught him it was wrong. The solution to this problem is not feminizing all the men, because you're never going to do that. That's why so many men are acting out, because they don't know what to do with their true feelings. It'd be like looking at a woman and telling her, you know what? I don't think you should be so sappy in how you care for the kids. I don't think you should be so emotional. It don't matter what you say to that woman. It don't matter if she tries not to be. She's going to be, because that's who she is. Right? Can you be a man? It doesn't matter if you tell the man to stop acting like that. He is who he is. And by the way, why are we calling God's creation wrong? See, godly masculinity is strong. It's stubborn. If I wasn't stubborn, would we be sitting here today? Nope. If I needed a consensus to act, would we be sitting here today? Nope. If I got caught up in my emotions all the time, would we be sitting here today? No. The prime reason for the disdain of our culture towards masculinity and God is false or toxic masculinity. Men have drawn strength for centuries from the importance of their place and strength in culture instead of drawing strength from God. Oh. I tell godly men, I say, I don't care what your wife thinks. What did God tell you to do? Now it's your job to love her and convince her and guide her and direct her and teach her that what God has called you to do is what you're supposed to do. If she says to you, honey, I really think this is a bad idea, and you say, why? And she says, I've been praying about it, you better put the brakes on. Because us men are a little slow when it comes to the things of the Spirit sometimes. No joke. And our wives are way more sensitive to the Spirit. If she says, I've been praying and this is why, but if she's just over there going, I don't want to do that. Why not? Because I don't like that. You look at her and say, well, what can I do to help you change? I'll say it to you like this, godly men. I'll say it to you like I told Richard and I were talking about what to do with the guys in the homeless shelter. Ask them to do something simple. Something that's not going to cost them too much, but something that's just showing they're willing to submit and obey. And if they don't, kick them out. I don't recommend you men to do that. Don't go home and say to your wife, hey, honey, somebody's over there snorting. Don't go home and say to your wife, hey, honey, I do this all the time because I'm forgetful. I'll walk downstairs and leave something in my bedroom. And I'll say, hey, I left my keys upstairs. Honey, can you go get them for me? Well, who do you think you are? Nobody. I was just asking my wife if she'd go get them for me. Well, why does she have to go get them? I didn't know I needed a reason. Well, who do you think you are? Her husband. Well, do you ever do anything for her? Yeah. My wife, I'll say, man, I forgot my keys. She'll go, I'll be right back. I'll get them. They're probably upstairs. I don't even have to ask her. But she's perfect. She's Saint Beth. You guys don't believe that. It's true. Two other people have tried to be my spouse and they failed. And they lost their minds. She has not lost her mind yet. She is a saint. Okay? They loved me when they left me. They just couldn't. They're like, she just offers. But ask. Just ask. See what happens. Carol, what would happen if Terry asked you to go get something for him? What would you do? You would do it. I believe she would do it. Most of you don't think she would, but I believe she would. It's like, well, what would it hurt? What will it hurt to obey the man that God has called you to run with. Think about this. So Richard says, why don't you clean that bathroom? We can talk. Get the bathroom cleaned up and we can go upstairs and talk about this. Why do I have to clean the bathroom? Get out. Now, do you understand the reason for that? There's a waiting list of people to get into the homeless shelter. People are calling us every day. Richard has to send us texts. There's no beds left in the homeless shelter because we send people to him and then there's nobody, they can't get in. Why would we minister to somebody who is fighting and doesn't understand how to submit to authority? When there's somebody else who will grow and is ready to receive. Now in your marriage, men, ladies, now, hey listen, there ain't no reason why you can't look at your husband and say, can I ask you why you want me to go upstairs and get him? I recommend that you ask him. Can I ask you why you want me to go get him and you can't get him? And he might say, well, because I'm late and I'm going to get this ready, so if you go get those, I can get out of here. And he might say, no reason, I'm just the man. And then you have the opportunity to do one of two things. To what? To pick up a club? To say, well, I'm only doing this because you're my husband and I want to be obedient. Not because I think it's right. Just for your information. I get people all the time, they call my wife. My wife's like, I don't know what to tell him. I'm like, give me the phone. Some of you men might know that the words that came out of your wife's mouth was from my mouth. Is Evan in the room? He's watching. You go back there and you say this to him. I can't say that to him. Why not? Well, it'll make him mad. This isn't about whether he's mad or not. If he wants to throw a little fit on the floor like a little boy, go let him have it. When he's done, you look at him and say, you done yet? Can we clean up now? Can we clean up your mess that you made, buddy? It's okay. It's okay. You want mommy to burp you too? What's wrong with looking at your husband and telling him he's acting like a child? Folks, if I act like a child, I looked at my wife, I said, you better tell me I'm acting like a child. Any men in the room ever get caught up in your emotions? Any women in the room ever get caught up in your emotions? You better all raise your hand, girls. Any women in the room ever looked at you and looked at your husbands and said, just tell me, I'm just having a moment. Just encourage me to stop. Right? Why can't you give your husband the same opportunities? Just like I got a house full of girls, right? And there's 17, 12, 10, and 2 7-year-olds, and now an infant. And do you think it's fun helping them figure out their emotions? Anybody ever raised teenage girls? They're like, I'm a teenage girl, it ain't no fun. Okay? I have to give them grace, but the worst thing I could do for them, now listen to what I'm about to say, ladies. The worst thing I can do for my daughters is to say, well, it's okay, they're teenage girls. They're emotional. Just leave them alone. The worst thing I can do for them is to disengage and pout because I have to experience their struggle of understanding their emotions. Well, what do? Wade in there with them. You're their father. You're strong enough to stand in the tide of emotions. You wade in there and say, now look, I understand this how you feel, but do we make decisions based on how we feel? If I did everything that I felt, would I have been with your mother? No. Trust me. If I did everything that I felt, would I be in prison right now? Yeah, I'd have killed somebody. Amen? Men? Yeah. I'd have murdered them. I'm pretty skilled. I might not have been in prison. I might have figured out a way out of it. But anyways, any men in the room can testify to this? Yeah. If I did the things that I felt, I would have fathered 150 kids with 200 women. Figure that one out. Any men in the room testify to that? I tell men all the time, I tell my girls all the time, if men did what they felt, they'd be humping everything that was warm and wet. I'm not talking about old men. I'm talking about 20-year-olds. And if you sit there and go, I don't know, you don't remember when you were 20. Any man in the room testify to this? Raise your hand. Look at them, ladies. So I wade in it with my daughters, and I tell them the truth, and I speak truth to them, and I help them take every vain imagination captive and submit it to what God says instead of what they feel. Because I love my daughters. And I want them to be a blessing to their husbands. And I want their emotionalness and their feelings and emotions to be a blessing to them instead of a cursing. Why don't we offer our men and boys the same thing? When my wife gets emotional, I know that she did not have a godly man to walk through it with her when she was a teenager, and she rebelled, and she acted a fool. And the guy that was her stepfather at the time actually did a pretty decent job, but there was not that bond there that he could have to do that with, right? When she gets emotional, I wade in it with her, and I give her grace, and I help her understand, and I encourage her. That's what men do. Guys, if you're married or you want to be married, you should listen. And every man in this room wants to be married unless you're old and it doesn't work no more. Truth will set you free, folks. You want to be married? Listen to what I'm saying. While our culture demands patience and grace for those struggling with their weakness, they have no grace for those struggling with how to act in their strength. They simply judge strength as evil. Your job at your workplace, your boss has strength and power and authority over you, and you hate him. People who own companies are evil. They employ tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. They write checks for them so they can spend money on Fridays. But yet we treat them as though they're evil. All authority outside of the government has been considered evil. And we find every little thing that power does, every little mistake they make, and we crucify them. And we have now done that with men. We will give women all the grace in the world to figure out their emotions. But with men, we isolate them, we jail them, and we force them to be in counseling. You think that I'm joking. You think I'm being over-exaggeration. Nope. I've watched women lose their temper on their husbands, get all emotional. He pins her to the wall to keep her from beating on him. He goes to jail, and he is marked for the rest of his life for domestic because he refuses to press charges against her. And what was he doing? Trying to protect himself. But he's not allowed. Why is he not allowed? Because he's the strong man. And strength in our society is evil. There's one problem with that. God is strength. God is boldness. God is righteousness. God doesn't have a committee meeting to decide right and wrong. God doesn't have to call a group of people in to the office to have some little group to decide what happened and whether it was good or bad for the person. God decides that on his own without consultation. And we don't like that. That's why we have no patience for men. That's why when we see a little bit of sign of masculinity and boldness, then it's brutishness. It's harshness. I remember in high school we had an old school coach. He coached under the coach that won state championships in the 70s. And in the early, mid to late 80s, we had an old school coach. And then they decided to bring somebody in who was the wide receivers coach from a college to be our coach. And he was one of those, it's okay, guys. Give it your best, guys. Do your best, guys. We were losing 40-0. He's over there going, it's okay, guys. You did your best. Don't worry about it. And I was just like, am I in the twilight zone? I must be. How could the coach be happy and encouraging when we have failed? I want a coach to get in my business. Tell me what I did wrong. Not tell me I did my best and don't worry about it. I want to worry about why that guy caught a touchdown on me. I want to worry why we didn't gain any yards. That's what we're here for. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And if people don't approach us like that, affirming our efforts, I tried my hardest and nobody cared. I hear it all the time. Pastor Mike just uses people. Nope. I just want you to be productive. If you want to call that using, you're in the wrong church. This is not toxic masculinity. Read your Old Testament and your New Testament. God was a God of productivity, and people who did not produce were punished. At that gas station, they were talking about people getting free food. I said, you know what we need? The reason why that 24-year-old boy still living in his mom and dad's basement playing video games and can't seem to find a job is because he's still eating. You heard the old story, right? The old thing, how do you get to a man? What is it? Through his stomach. You take that. Next time that boy comes out of the basement to get some food out of the refrigerator, it has a combination lock on it. And the pantry is empty. And there's a safe in the garage with a lock on it. He calls his mom, Mom, what happened to all the food? What food? Well, you guys don't have any food in the house. Well, sure we do. Where's it at? Well, there ain't none for you. Son, your father and I have decided that we're going to practice biblical principles. And the Bible says, when a man refuses to work, he shall not eat. So we're blessing you with the word of God. Do you know what would happen? You know what happened to that young man? He'd get on the phone and call his buddies and move into their basement. Until their mom got tired of the grocery bill being twice as much. And then he'd probably get angry and go get disability for being ADHD or bipolar. Right? This is why. Listen, men, listen to what I'm about to say. That behavior is why masculinity is not tolerated in our society. The solution is not to bow down to it. The solution is for you men to start being godly men. Walking in righteousness, not your own righteousness, but the righteousness of the Word of God. Walking in productivity because that's what God gave you the ability to do. Taking personal responsibility for feeding yourself and all the little children you couldn't control yourself and made. Making sure they're all taken care of. And then having enough left over so that you can buy whatever you want. No, bless others with it. And once we have you act like that, then the women around you might give honor and glory to God. Let me say something that's really harsh. Just recently, I had a friend that I knew that I ministered to for a number of years. And God had delivered them out of a life of debauchery. And they turned their back on the church. And they did their way. And his wife fell into her old ways. Whose fault is that? His. It's his fault. See, because godly men take responsibility for all that God has called them to lead. There used to be a day when men's children turned out to be scoundrels. The father felt like he failed. There used to be a day, if a grown man was found on the side of the road beating the snot out of his 20-year-old son, other men stood around and cheered. You ever heard, I brought you into this world. I can take. Do you know that they can't even air those TV shows because the world can't handle that kind of speak? No, it's because he was a pervert. Nope, they stopped airing those TV shows before that because he was a monster. He was an aggressive. Dude, how many guys were raised with every man being like that? What has happened? We hate masculinity. We see it as evil. Why? Because men have failed to be masculine and not apologize for it. Have you educated your children what godly masculinity looks like and false toxic masculinity looks like? Have you educated your wife and your friends? Do you know how you educate people? By showing them. By showing them. You young men, still in school, right? Oh, I was going to get you. What are you focused on? What are you focused on? A life of servanthood and blessing those that God's called you to lead? Are you focused on your feelings, your life, the girls? My shout out to you, men, grow up. Read your word. What does it look like to be a masculine man? Real quick. I got to close. I'm way over. People are freaking out. What's it look like to be a masculine man? A man who loves all those that he's been called to lead. He would lay down his life for them, not at their request, but at God's request. A godly man heeds the advice from those that he's been called to lead, but is not in bondage to the advice that those that he is called to lead. A godly man draws his strength from the Lord, not those that he has been called to lead. A godly man provides for his immediate family, pays for his mistakes and his desires, and makes more money than is needed to provide for his family and those around him, and uses the majority of his excess to bless others. Did the Bible ever record Jesus making sure he was comfortable? Does the Bible in the New Testament ever record, or even the Old Testament for that fact, the godly men of that day worrying about the future and whether or not they were going to be comfortable? Does it talk about making sure that you leave your children better than the way you were? No, it talks about training them up in the way they should go, with the understanding that if you train them and model to them a godly lifestyle, they will be better than you. But it starts with you, not training. When we lead men, we get our orders from who? God. We get them from God. Who do we confirm the orders from God with? Those that God has placed under us in our authority, and those that we have placed ourselves under. We never do it on our own. It is the fool who thinks he hears directly from God and does not need others to confirm God's voice. You know what you do with people like that? You just step back and watch. You might even take bets and sell tickets. What day is this going to implode? I'm not talking about you, Greg. Godly men obey God. Do you understand this? That they draw their strength from God. Now, women, shout out to you. Listen. Can you give your husband or that godly man that's ruling over you or leading you, can you give him grace? I love women who they absolutely despise and cannot handle their husband's behavior. However, they will travail with a 3-year-old to teach them to read, to teach them to go to the bathroom and the potty. And they will be so gracious and so caring and so encouraging, but they can't stand their husband screws up. And I just look at him and go, really? And why can't you? Because our culture's taught us, pay the man back. Give it to the man. Stick it to him. The person that's in authority over me is evil. Right? Did you not understand that God called that person to be over you? And he called you to bless that person? Yeah. Any women in the room ever had to hold their husbands accountable because they went off the rails? Okay. Dan, Angie, raise your hand. You weren't listening. Did your husband ever go off the rails and you have to hold him accountable, Angie? Yes. Laura's over here. My wife has to hold me accountable. I look at her and say, if you let me do that and you don't climb up in my behind, I'm mad at you. Ugh. Get it. Don't even tolerate it. Hold me accountable in love. My wife teaches ladies, if you will be his closest confidant, if he knows he can trust you, that you've got his best interest in mind and not yours, that you're going to be there for him no matter what, he will do anything for you. Military knows this. It doesn't work, Brittany. Don't shake your head at me. It doesn't work. It doesn't work if you put a timeline on it. It doesn't work if there's an alternative always waiting in the boundaries. It doesn't work. It doesn't. You have to be, listen, that's the horse I came here on, and that's the horse I'm going out of here on. I don't care what happens. That's who I'm going to be with. Listen, ladies, listen. If I looked at you and said, hold your husbands accountable in love. If he gets mad at you in the middle of it, I have this 666 number you can call. Just dial 666, and there'll be a group of guys like me and Tom and Rob that show up to your house. Would you be willing to emotionally and lovingly, caringly hold your husbands accountable? Yeah, because you have no fear. The problem is you don't have a big enough relationship with God where you think he'll fight and win your battles. You want your husband to love you like Christ loved the church and die for you, right? Well, how about you put yourself in a position of danger where you're going to submit to your husband even if it costs you your life? That's evil, Pastor Mike. Is it? You want your husband to die on the cross to serve you, right? You want him to die like Christ did the church, right? Well, I don't think any woman should ever put herself in danger. That's why you have a 666 number. You come to this church, all you got to do is call me. It's not the first time I've had an intervention. It will not be the last time. Normally, just the idea that it might happen transforms the heart and mind of your husband. That's what the church, listen to what I'm about to say. Think about godly leadership, godly, passionate, manly, masculine leadership in the church. Do you know what we do in our society today? I'm calling the police. You're not treating me like that. What else do? We turn to the government. Right? We turn to the government. Imagine if you... Any women know that I will be at your door in a heartbeat? Raise your hand if you know that. In a heartbeat. With bells on. With a smile on my face. ready to lay hands of glory upon whoever it might be. I'll speak in tongues while I'm doing it if you want me to. Yea, though he walks through the valley of the shadow of death, he shall fear the Lord. We all laugh. But when you have masculine, godly men in church, boys dressed up like men either transform or they flee. And godly masculine men, I ain't going to show up at your house to beat the crap out of your husband. I'm going to show up at your house willing to beat the crap out of your husband, but willing to love him and talk him down and help him see the errors of his ways. I'm willing to do way more than that police officer's willing to do. That police officer doesn't care about you and your family and your children. He's doing his job. The reason why the world won't trust masculinity, they think all masculinity is toxic, is because we have failed, men. Listen, I'm living it. I am masculine. How many of you guys know I'm masculine? How many of you know I am a loving, caring, nurturing father? Okay? And how many of you know I get accused of being an ogre and brute and mean and evil? Why? Why is that? They don't know me. Why is that? Because I talk passionately. I don't apologize for the Word of God. I don't apologize for the direction that God has told me to go in. I don't beg people. I don't seek consensus and grovel at people's feet. And because of that, I have masculinity, and people automatically assume it's wrong. Automatically. There's men sitting in here today that have watched me be attacked. Not verbally, physically. I had a girl jump on my back and bite at me and punch me. You want to think that I'm mean and angry? I held that girl for 5 minutes against the wall while she was biting my arm, patiently saying, "Would you please stop?" I'm not that guy. I'll hit you if I have to protect myself or somebody else, but I'm not that guy. Not that guy. But I get accused of that all the time because I'm bold and I'm passionate and I'm non-apologetic. People, my relationship with my daughters, they're like, why do they like him so much? Because I'm a nice guy. Well, you can't be a nice guy. I listen to you talk. What does me sharing the Word of God boldly make me a bad guy? Well, I've seen you get mad at people. One of the attributes of God is wrath. Justice and righteousness. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Ladies, listen, most of the men in this room are still boys. There's about a half a dozen to a dozen men in this room, but the rest of them are still boys. Encourage them. Have the grace to love them as they mature. Ladies, you remember when you were struggling at controlling your emotions and somebody walks up and says, "You're stupid. You need to change." Did that encourage you? Not at all. Made you cry. Made you worse, right? made you worse in your emotions, right? Well, when you look at your husband and say, "You're stupid, you're out of control," it makes him worse. Just like you. No different. Well, emotions aren't as harmful. They aren't. I'd spend more time counseling people who are emotionally abused by their parents than I ever do people who are physically abused. And that includes sexual physical abuse. The emotional abuse is way worse. Manipulating your children and shaming them is way worse. Way worse than physically. Way worse. You think back in your own mind and you know it's true. Encourage one another in the Lord. Celebrate one another's differences. I do. I'm a man in a house with 7 women, and all of a sudden they get emotional. One of the little girls gets emotional. I'm like, Beth, I celebrate your emotionalism. Thank you. I got a 17-year-old daughter. A 12-year-old's just getting ready to start her menstrual cycle. You walk home and what's wrong, Allison? I don't know. Beth, you might want to talk to Allison. Well, why can't you talk? The worst part is I'm more emotional than my wife. My wife's like, shut up. It's a part of life. Deal with it. She does. Oh, yeah. I'm like, okay, come here, Allison. I'm sorry, sweetie. Give her a hug. Just celebrate one another's differences instead of looking at masculinity as though it's evil. If a man ever looked at a woman, at her emotionalism, and called it evil, that would be considered abuse. You know it's true. Why are we telling men that their masculinity is evil? They're just trying to figure out how to use it. They're trying to figure out how to have strength in it instead of looking at it as though it's evil. How many men in the room have looked at your masculinity and thought it was evil? How many of you men looked at your sex drive and thought it was evil? If it wasn't for your sex drive, the world wouldn't have humans all over the place. It's not evil. You just got to learn how to deal with it. And this is why. Listen, this is why your family, your church, your friends, your nation, your city has no authority and power. More so in your family and church. But even we have no power anymore. We can't get anything done. I'll give you an example, and I'm done. We have a wall that needs to be built in our country. Not because we hate illegals, not because we hate immigrants, but because people are abusing it. And all we need to do is put up a barrier so we can control the flow of people coming into our country. Even people who are not political will say, all the people that are saying, no, we can't build that wall, all those people just 6 years ago voted for building the wall. What have they turned it into? A vote on meanness and toxic masculinity. Why? Because we have a masculine man in the White House who is he's got his problems, but every one of us has. Let me ask you this question. Would you like a guy who talks softly to you and then is mean, or one who talks harshly to you and is sweet? So how we say things to each other is more important than what we do. Think about that and you go, oh. Let's have grace for each other. Laura, are you glad you had grace for Chris? Are you glad that are you glad you suffered for 10 years loving an ogre? And folks, I can tell you stories. This man was an ogre. A pompous, arrogant boy dressed up in men's clothes. Okay? Didn't have a father. Didn't really have a mother. Okay? Are you glad you were gracious? Why? Because he's grown and God's changed him, and he didn't stop being masculine. No. Does he still struggle with it, or is he perfect now? Oh, he struggles with it? Yeah. Think about what we're missing as a group of people and our families, because we cannot tolerate masculinity. Let's pray. God, I thank you because you are masculine, and many of us have stopped our relationship with you and what you have for us because of how you brought it to us. Because we don't understand what you look like. Because we've defined how you're supposed to communicate with us. We defined how we should feel when you're done communicating with us. But you're God. And God, when you speak to us, you don't make mistakes and you don't do it wrong. God, forgive us because we've created an environment where we can't even have grace for you. We can't even be gracious in our walk with you. We've been the determiner of how things should be and how you should speak to our hearts and minds, and where you should take us and how it should make us feel. God, I ask you to teach us to be gracious. To teach us that boldness, stubbornness, single-mindedness is not evil. Just like everything else, it can be, but it's not innately by itself evil. That righteousness and punishment and correction are not evil. Teach us, God, to embrace that. Teach us to have grace for those who are in the middle of correction, whether it be our spouse or ourselves or our friends. Teach us to love you the way you are, and to love all those that you bring into our lives the way they are. And let you be the one that transforms them. Forgive us of our arrogance and our pride. And God, we desire to be who you want us to be. And we desire to experience all that you intend for us. We give you all the glory and the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for being here today. Folks, sorry I went so long.